What's up, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I am Coach Greg, and today we're breaking down Rose not gonna work here anymore. Nah. Felt Rose Namajunas, one of my favorite fighters of all time, highly requested. You guys voted for her. I was happy to do this breakdown. She's a lot of fun. An amazing fighter. I don't want to do a whole background on her. There's movies on her. We talk about all the history of her, being a refugee, domestic violence, piano playing, all that stuff. What I want to focus on is just a couple key pertinent details. Obviously, she does some very high-level training. Her boyfriend, Pat Barry, they work together a lot. She also trains a lot with Valentina Shevchenko, as well as being, of course, a Trevor Whitman fighter, which definitely shows in her boxing, particularly in the way that she boxes with very dynamic footwork. What I really like about Valentina Shevchenko is it's a nice culmination of her skills that she uses as a Taekwondo black belt, a karate black belt, and then her boxing and a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. It comes together in a very cohesive system. That's what we're trying to get into, right? We're talking about systems that have made it possible for some people to consistently always win at the highest level, right? And Rose Namajunas is a great case study because she definitely has a very clear-cut path that she follows and consistently can go back to over and over and over again to win. And it's led to some remarkable results in her career. So that being said, stay tuned and let's start breaking down Rose Namajunas. Hey gang, real quick before we get started, I do want to remind you, so the Nemean Fight System 2nd edition is now available on Amazon. I'm going to do a whole video on that soon to break it down. Please go check it out. If you're a martial artist, this is a book that you need to have in your library. I know I'm biased, but it is really an amazing work that I put together. I'm very excited about it. If you're not a reader, go check out my course on dynamic striking and BJJ Fanatics. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so when we talk about Thug Rose, we have 4 key components that we're going to be talking about today as part of her game. The first one is going to be using footwork for range management. Then we're going to be talking about head movement, particularly at entries and exit strategies. We're also going to be talking a lot about timing and her ability to use disruption on her techniques, usually combined with that footwork and the probing step to be able to kind of set up that perfect timing to land when they're not expecting it. Which brings us to our 4th point, which is getting them comfortable and then switching things up. And we're going to talk about how she does all of these. Now, I want to start with footwork and her defensive gestures and stuff like that. What's interesting is that her footwork is not like a lot of boxers, right? It's almost like more of a point style, which makes sense considering her karate and Taekwondo background. It's a lot of both feet bouncing in and out, right? And what's interesting is how she kind of combines them, because she'll probe in, spring in, and then she does a lot of L stepping out and circle out. Probe in, probe in, probe in, L step out, right? You see a little bit of stance switching, right? A lot of this point style footwork with balls of the feet bouncing, right? And this is what she uses to maintain a range. What I like that she does is she always keeps herself just outside of punching range and just into kicking range. She's not worried about if people kick at her. She defends that fairly well. When people throw kicks, she's comfortable blocking and evading. If they throw a turning back kick, checking to hit, that kind of stuff. And what this allows her to do is force them to engage with boxing from an outside range. And one of the things that helps with this is, I talked about the monkey see, monkey do principle, where people tend to copy each other's, and we tend to mimic each other. And this applies in fighting as well. And so what she does is, by giving them a lot of boxing, outside range, jab cross, get back out, I'll step out, right? Get in. Well, if I'm constantly throwing boxing at you, and you're not having any success with kicks, what do you think you're going to go to? You're going to start throwing boxing back at me. And this is what she wants. Because from this kicking range, she has a lot of response time. From in the pocket, right, it's hard to respond quickly. But from out here, it's very easy for her to get out of range or to time her counters. And this is a big part of what she does. She uses what we described on here as the probing step. We talked about this with Cyril Gahn, we talked about it with Arnold Allen, we talked about it with Shavkat Rakhmonov. Guys who probe in, generate a reaction, and disengage. And then from here, depending on their response, if I come in and you do nothing, I catch you. If I come in, I can lure out an attack and counter, or I can always disengage. Dealer's choice. But from this range, I have a lot of response time, and I can probe in, get a reaction out of you, or if you don't do anything, catch you clean. This type of footwork and range management is a key component to her game. Now, what she does that also helps with this is head movement. Whenever she enters, she has excellent head movement. And I feel like her head movement, once again, I think this is a lot of Trevor Whitman in here, where as she comes in, right, she slips her head off the line on the probing step, right, and then she throws her punches. She also frequently drops her head on the punches, very George St. Pierre style, a lot of like Dominic Cruz style, like dropping jabs and stuff like that, where her head is down. And what frequently happens is that when she engages, as they go to counter back, they're thinking jab cross because of the range. And what frequently happens is she comes in, they miss because she's underneath it, she comes out, catches them with like a hook or something like that. We'll talk about that more in counters in a second. But then she also adds a lot of head gestures on the way out. So it's a lot of spring in, head off the line, jab cross, head out. This type of stuff makes her very elusive. It's part of why she's so hard to hit. From the outside, if you throw, she'll do a lot of things like pull to a counter, right? This type of stuff is very easy because she's already kind of outside, so that motion feels very natural. What this means is that she is a nightmare to catch. Now, some people have tried to explore going after a lot of leg kicks with her. Your Honor, your J-Chick did this a lot with her, particularly in the second fight. And, you know, leg kicks can be an excellent tool, but sometimes they're also something you can ignore to do more damage. Win the exchange rather than the kicking battle. And what she doesn't want to do is let them change the terms of the fight. So when somebody starts kicking her leg a lot, right, she doesn't want to start turning it into a leg kicking battle. She still wants to keep them feeling like it's a boxing match because she's going to use this for her setups later on. We'll talk about that soon. But as she comes in, if they do start leg kicking her, right, she'll throw a cross on them, right, or she just ignores it. As it gets into later rounds, if it does become a problem, you know, what you'll see at that point is instead of like a lot of the bounce in, bounce out, she'll start to stay more in the pocket or put blitzing and pressure on them to make it difficult for them to throw that leg kick with ease. That is a big part of what she does. Now, let's talk about some other pressures that she tends to deal with. Most of the time, she can maintain this with ease. Just stay in that outside range, right? I'll step out, come in here, head move, roll out. Just do this over and over again, right? If they start to pressure in on her and start to give her a little bit of forward pressure, you'll see her start to bite down and long guard a little bit. She'll maintain her range, draw out a punch, and counter, right? Boom! Right, but maintain that as they start to pressure in until she can disconnect and go back to her game. If they start to aggressively pressure her, and this has happened to her a couple times, she'll back up and then eventually circle out. People can only blitz so many times before you start setting yourself up for failure, right? You can't constantly use a blitz. And if they do, you know, I'm sure if somebody tried to blitz at her too often, she'd back up and start catching them on the way, right? You cannot use that all the time. But when it does happen, mostly she just backs up and circles out and resets. Since we're talking about defense, let's add in some counters. We already kind of touched on these. Commonly, she has a couple different counter strategies that she'll use. When you talk about a proactive, when I'm luring out their attacks, right, this is when you'll start to see a lot of coming in here, pull, jab cross, right? And this we were talking about with that probing step, pulling it out of them. If they don't bite on it, remember, she attacks them with disruption. If she has an early recognition, this is where you start seeing her coming back and throwing overhand over the top a lot of times, right? As they throw, she throws over top of it. So she'll come in, and as she starts to enter in, they go to throw a jab, and she throws it over the top. Or she'll slip and come over the top, this type of stuff. Because of her built-in defenses, one of the ways she counters a lot is as she comes in here with her head down low, right? She slips, she comes in head down low, and then as they throw, she'll roll out to her hook. This is something she hits quite often. And then also, as a bit of a later response, she will also add in here, right, coming in here, and as they start to throw at her, catching the hook afterwards. She likes to do a lot of left hand counters. That seems to be her preference, is to throw left hand overhand or hook. She will sometimes throw a right if they're leading with the jab because she likes to come over top though. That's the more majority of her defense and countering. Stay tuned, let's come back and talk about her offense and start getting into some of the ways that she picks people apart. Let's talk about thug rows and some of the other tactics that she uses from an offensive perspective now. You know, we talked about disruption and timing. This is a big part of it, and this is what I like about that probing step a lot that we talked about. Like in shot, Pat Rockmanov, he's really good at this, the idea of stepping in, drawing out a reaction. And you're looking for one of two things. Assuming that they don't throw where it allows you to counter, what I'm looking for is them to be kind of feeling out the situation, trying to figure out how they're going to attack me, and they're at a moment of indecision where they're like, they haven't really decided to commit to an attack, and that's an in-between moment that we can hit. The other one is they go, okay, I'm going to hit, but they haven't quite committed to it yet. They're getting ready to commit to it. So the first one, as I come in, they haven't really decided to do anything, so I go, and I throw my shot, and so it forces them to be reactive. They have a late response to this because they're so busy going, that they're too busy thinking and not being in the moment. This happens a lot. The other one, and this one is my favorite, because if you can catch this, it's so easy to catch people and have no response out of. They're getting ready to hit. And just at the moment where they feel you come in and they're like gonna time it as you come in, they come in here to throw, and as they do, you just penetrate right through and you catch them on the inside before they get a chance to get it off. Right? They're starting to go and then they get clipped. This is something that takes a lot of practice, but the nice thing about this probing step is it allows you to take your time and find the moment for that. And this is what I'm talking about, disrupting their attacks. Right at the moment where they're trying to figure it out, and at the moment when they're getting ready to throw, they get caught. And Rose Namajunas is very good at finding this moment. And it all occurs off of the probing step and footwork that she does. So she comes in here, they go throw, all right, she comes in there, she finds them all, pop! And the nice thing about this is it's already kind of setting and breaking a pattern. They're never sure when she's gonna pull the trigger. This is a constant feint, right, with the head movement, constantly not sure when she's gonna go. And then she catches them. The next thing that she does, and this is where we kind of start to talk about setting and breaking patterns, getting them comfortable so she forgets about things. And she does a switch up. Now, the way that it works is this. She gets them to have it. I throw boxing, you throw back. I throw straight punches, you throw back. I disengage, right? Play this game, and I throw this. And you get so busy thinking about this that now she does a change up. That change up can occur in a couple ways. Against Zhang Wei Li, it was a high skip roundhouse kick. All right, so she's in here. And then she switches up. Sorry, I'm not too stretched out. But she comes in here and she catches the skip roundhouse kick. And Zhang Wei Li's so intent on the straight punches, she forgets about the kick. She'll switch in other kicks as well. She'll throw front kicks, sometimes with a punch behind it, but usually just one-off kicks. She'll throw a side kick, right? Occasionally throwing a leg kick. She'll mix it up with different types of attacks. My favorite one, though, is when she switches to the uppercut. She has huge success with this, especially because, remember we talked about her head movement on the spring step tends to be outside. So a lot of times what happens is she comes in here and they're expecting the straight, and she switches to the uppercut. And the uppercut, she almost always lands it because she makes them forget it. She makes them forget it's a possibility. We'll talk about, she does the same thing on a southpaw when she switches stance. She does a lot against Rebus. We'll talk about that in a second. But the idea of switching it up and attacking with something different, if you can get people into patterns and then break the patterns, that's fighting. That's really what it is. So from the other side, she's used some southpaw stuff before. You know, when Ioana was starting to break down her leg a lot, you start to see her do more southpaw stuff. But against Rebus, she had a game plan. You see her do this a lot. A lot of stepping forward with her right to throw the left. So she would spring in, get her set here, and then step in and do a switch cross. Very similar like how a drop shift goes, but instead of shifting in place, she's advancing forward. She starts adding trapping into this. Come in here, trap to a jab cross, stopping the front hand, and putting the left hand on her. She did this a lot during the fight. And then she gets her used to this, right? She makes it up a little bit. She comes back to it, gets used to this pattern again, and then she does a switch punch. And I think in this fight, she did it too, a switch uppercut to the chin, where she came under the arm, and it was beautiful. Really, really precision. And that switch to an uppercut is amazing. But the other thing that she did that I liked is using that to set up her single leg. Think about this. And then here, I switch, and my single leg becomes very available because they're so used to straight and high, straight and high, straight and high, bounce in, bounce out. I'll step out, right? And when I do shoot, you've forgotten about it because she doesn't shoot very often. It's just enough. So stay tuned. When we come back in the next section, we'll talk about combos. Okay, let's talk about combos and blitzing a little bit. Combos, she mostly sticks with basics, real basic boxing combinations. Mostly, it's gonna be on the outside, throwing a 1-2, and then getting back out, right? Coming on the outside, like we talked about that right foot step, trap to the jab cross, right? Once again, just versions of the jab cross over and over again. She occasionally will mix things in and do your classic like 2-3-2 kind of stuff, right? So that as she comes back here, 2-3-2, right? Very classic kind of boxing. And like most boxers, pop, 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 roll out at the end. Very classic boxing. But most of the time she doesn't do a lot of combinations because mostly she's trying to stay at that outside range and pick them apart. But she will occasionally throw things in. Like we talked about how she'll throw that uppercut. Sometimes she'll throw a 5-2. That's a combination I actually wish she threw more because I think it would land very well for her. She does also throw in like some like the body jack to an overhand like you talked about, like Ilia Topuria does. She doesn't do it a lot, but occasionally. Once again, that's the key to her game. Create a pattern, get them to relax, and then switch things up. And this is what she does with the blitz, and her blitzing is amazing because of this. She doesn't overuse it. The key to blitzing is you use it once in a while. And this is how she caught Joanna. The first time they fought, she set this nice even keel. Right? And then she changes it up. And she catches her in that exchange. And it throws off her opponents because they get used to fighting at a certain pace. And then all of a sudden you have the high volume, high pressure coming at you. And it's very hard to deal with when it happens suddenly and when it's unexpected. And she is great at making these unexpected because of the switch up. She creates and sets a pattern, gets you into a flow, and then she changes it. And that's what she does over and over again. Stays on the outside, throws her jab. Jab cross. Right? She does this over and over again. Then she kicks the side kick. Back to this. Right? And then she switches it. High roundhouse kick. Right? Throw in the switch punching and stuff like that, the uppercuts. And it's just enough that these are the things that she does real damage with. The jab cross, she works him over and she slowly breaks him down. But when she does the switch ups, that's when she catches people. That's how she knocked out Zhang Weili. That's how she catches Joanna with the blitz. It works. Okay, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the wrestling stuff today. It's sufficient to know that it's difficult to take her down because of her range. She has a high response time, and when you have a high response time from the outside, it's easy to defend a lot of takedowns. Her own takedown, she has a very high success rate because she makes them forget about it. And when she does go for it, she transitions really well. She'll go for a single leg. If she has to, she'll come into a body clinch. Very effective from there. Against the cage, she doesn't do a lot of cage work because it's mostly about disconnecting, getting head position, fighting him off, throwing a hook on the way out on the disengagement, right? She doesn't usually put people against the cage. And if she does get them there, like she goes for like a single leg and she ends up putting them up against the cage, she usually lets it go, throws a hook and disconnects because she wants to keep it in the middle of the ring. Now, She is amazing at when she gets taken down, not accepting a bottom position. This is something that you see a lot in the Rebus fight, where she does a lot of like that headlock position. And one of the things I like is she re-rolls very, very well. So like in the Rebus fight, see if I can duplicate this. As she gets to this like head and arm position, the ability to roll through, she was very effective with that. And then eventually just getting her elbow underneath and starting to kind of create space, that kind of stuff she had a lot of effect with. Really good work out of Kessa position. When she gets taken down most of the time, what you will see though, is as soon as she gets taken down, she gets to her base, gets to her knees, and gets an underhook and starts working her way back up. She never settles on the bottom and tries to play a bottom guard game. And I think that's the right philosophy for MMA. When there's striking involved, you're either on top or you get back to your feet. If you can sweep them, that's great, but mostly you should be trying to get back to your feet. When fighters start lingering a long time on the bottom, they get into trouble. Roman Dolidze is one of the best guard players in the UFC, and he still runs into a lot of problems on the bottom. So what you will see, and this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is her top game. It's interesting because you could definitely see the impact of training with somebody like a Valentina Shevchenko, who, when she gets into a closed guard, we talked about this in Shevchenko's breakdown, hands on the biceps, tight elbow pinch, head down, throw a shot, and return. Right? If she's losing this inside position, she's working for it, keeping this here, throwing a shot. If she can get back to her feet to stack, of course she'll do that, but that generally doesn't happen with her. She usually, if she ends up in a closed guard, tight elbows to keep their hips from being able to start throwing up the legs, whether it's to put feet on the hips, to kick off, to be able to do things like arm bars, triangles, all of their best movements, sweeps included, they have to have hip motion. So if I control the biceps, control the hips, tight inside position, and throw. That's really what she does from there. From a half guard, she frequently prefers to get to a half guard. She controls the far shoulder. She gets an underhook and a head control, and then it's just elbows. This is all she does. Her jiu-jitsu game on top is pretty simple. Get to a top position, get in control, and land shots without opening yourself up. Like I said, half guard, control the far shoulder, dropping elbows. Close guard, bicep control, control the hips. That's it. Nothing super fancy. Although she does obviously have a submission game, that's her preferred method when she gets on the ground. Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you share with your friends.